Once we're in a CBD system, they can keep their finger on that button constantly and move it around to make sure they get what they want. Do you trust them? Because if you keep your wealth in the fiat money system, that's what you're going to get. Me, I've taken it out. I've taken it out. I trust me and my choices and my educated decisions more than theirs, because their job is to keep you in and keep you calm. So what? How much more can they grow their balance sheet? They can do it until all confidence in them is lost. Forward guidance started in 2008 because of the great financial crisis. So the central bank said, this is what we're going to do, Wall Street. And then all Wall Street had to do was shift position. But incredibly, and maybe it's because they just didn't have any choice, central bankers gave that up by surprising the markets. They didn't have too many surprises up until 2022. That tests their credibility. And this is a con game. It requires confidence, and they're losing it. And what about 2023? Well, we keep being told that central banks are absolutely committed to continue to raise rates. That means that's going to impact all of that debt. And all of the debt that we can't even see that has to transition from LIBOR to SOFR, over 600 trillion notional value of that debt. But where the Fed was buying mortgage-backed securities and treasuries before, well, not really buying as much. And they are committed to liquidating, although you can see it goes up much faster than it comes down because they can't do it. They're still well over 8 trillion on their balance sheet. They can continue to grow, but you got to understand, because if you listen to the talking heads, they're saying, well, the Fed is creating this recession and the Fed can stop it just by doing a pivot, just by dropping interest rates back down and printing a whole lot more money. Except that the system, it was irretrievably broken in 2008. And all they did was paper over it. So you still have all of the dangers that we had in 2008, all those legacy derivatives that, as Warren Buffett puts it, are weapons of financial mass destruction. Well, those didn't go away. Those didn't get resolved because they're unique, right? You might have somebody betting on whether the sky's going to turn orange and somebody else says, I'll take that bet. Okay, as long as they keep paying, which means more debt, they can keep those derivatives afloat. But with the reverse of the interest rates, that's becoming more and more challenging because all these corporations, including banks are corporations, they're not separate from that. Well, including all of these entities that create these derivatives, it creates rising interest rates create a real problem because they didn't do it gently, right? You can even see from this last attempt at rising rates, they were trying to do it very slowly. Well, interest rates, why are they raising them so fast? Because inflation is obvious to the public. That is definitely not what they want. Definitely not. So what do we have ahead? Is it going to be a recession, which is what everybody's calling for? And although we're constantly told, well, this is not going to be that bad of a recession, right? It's just going to be a mild recession. Well, let me tell you, if you lose your job, that's more of a depression for you. And how do you solve a recession? With inflation, right? They're just the opposite sides of the coin. So honestly, it makes it really simple. How do you fight inflation? That's with deflation. That's what he's doing by raising the rates, is trying to engineer job that go away, a higher unemployment so that people can't ask for more money. Because it's certainly not the guys at the top, the Teslas of the world or the Elon Musks of the world or the Carl Icahns of the world, etc. That's not who's creating this inflation, right? And I hope you realize I'm being facetious when I say that. It's the workers that are now demanding more money because they're having trouble feeding their families. And while we have technically seen inflation in some areas grow more narrow so that overall inflation, we've hit peak inflation. I don't think so, especially since a big part that has driven that inflation number down a little bit has been oil. And if you read what OPEC Plus is talking about, well, I mean, oil is somewhere around $80 a barrel, give or take. Right now, well, they want to see it between 110 and 120. So do I think we've hit peak inflation? No, I do not. You believe it? Because they're going to turn these money guns on in a very big way. And they're going to take that, they're going to take their balance sheets to the moon. They're already up there. They're already by what? Jupiter? I mean, that's it. We are headed to the end, and we have to have a huge crisis before June 30th, of 2023, because they're going to have to make that transition. Can they postpone it? Well, I guess they can change the rules. I mean, they created the rules. I guess they can change them. And maybe they will postpone it, because I don't think they can pull it off. And Wall Street doesn't think they could pull it off because they had to be, and I say this because these corporations had to be forced to use SOFR. Forced. January 1, 2022, no more contracts with LIBOR in it. Up until that moment, the lion's share by a very wide margin of contracts that had LIBOR written into it. Do they have fallback language in those new contracts? Absolutely. But that's not going to stop the shift, and it's not going to stop the revaluation. And I personally think, and maybe I'm going to end up with egg on my face, because this is not something that I can control. But from all my experience, all of this time in these markets since I was 10 years old, I don't think it's going to be so easy. I just don't think it's going to be so easy. So what can you do to protect yourself? Because I think that's a real key. And, frankly, gold does very well in recessions. It does even better in depressions. It does even better in hyperinflation. So that is what I'm saying that you should do. Because I think we run an awful lot of geopolitical risk. I mean, between North Korea and South Korea, between China and the U.S., in the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine. I mean, the whole world is a hotbed. And according to the Bank for International Settlements, and why globally central banks have bought more gold than they ever have, is because gold is the only case of a financial asset with no counterparty liability. Everything else is running counterparty liability. And with the central banks on a global basis marching at raising rates to contain inflation so that you and I continue to trust their power, but these people are not gods. They're not. They're human beings. They're fallible. They have no real world experience, what it's like if they're the ones suffering through a recession or even a depression. They have no clue what it is to live and work and try and raise your family and take care of them and prepare for the future.